Setting up a new container garden is not only very easy, but also very rewarding. In today's episode, we look at all the steps you need to set up your own container garden. The products you will need to set up your container garden are whiskey or wine barrels, some plastic saucers, potting mix, drip irrigation tubes and emitters, and some plants. So our first step is to plan the area and to prepare our containers. So here we have about a 45-foot area that you see here that we are planning to use to set up our container garden. And as long as you know how many whiskey barrels or wine barrels you'll be using, you can measure out the area that you need and then start placing your wine barrels or whiskey barrels along the line. And in this area we are using about 5 whiskey barrels. This is the pre-drilled hole for the whiskey barrel. These whiskey barrels come with pre-drilled holes, but if you do not have holes drilled, just make sure that you drill some holes. These are plastic saucers that will help you catch the water under the container. This will also help your pavers from getting stained. So as you can see here, what we are doing is we are taking our whiskey barrel containers and placing the saucers below them. And you need to do this now because once you add the soil, it's going to be very heavy, and make sure you center it in such a way that the whiskey barrel sits right between the plastic saucer, as you can see here. And this is going to catch the water as you water the plants. We are now going to be setting up our drip line, and that's going to be our next step. But you can see here all the containers are lined up and ready. Let's now proceed to setting up the main drip line. We're going to be using this main line tubing. This is a 5/8 inch poly hose, and it's very easy to find them. You can buy them on Amazon. You can buy them at a lot of gardening centers like Lowe's and Home Depot. As you can see here, we've laid out all our containers and the drip line. The main drip line is set up, and the main drip line will end in this end connector. You first need to measure and cut the drip line to the required size, and at the end, since we are expanding this drip connection that we already have, we're going to be removing this end connector as you see here, and we're going to be putting an elbow that will connect to our new drip irrigation line. So as you can see here, these pieces fit exactly into each other, and that is why you need to make sure that you buy products from the same company. I will provide some product links in the video description below so that it's easier for you to buy these products without worrying about compatibility. And once again, we are just going to make sure that our main line fits the size of this line that we set up, and we just push in and this main line is now set up. You can use some garden pins to secure your main line. And at the end, what we're going to do is make sure once again that we cut to size and then add the end connector here. This is the runoff. So in case you want to flush the line, you just open up that cap. And I've discussed this in one of my previous videos as well. And I've used some duct tape to secure the main line. Now the main line might not sit properly, it might be like coiled, so the duct tape really helps. Our next step is to add the potting mix. Now you have two options here. One, you can use like bagged potting mix that you get at Costco. This is the Miracle Grow Organic Choice potting mix, which retains a lot of water and has high quality ingredients, and it has a lot of water retention properties as well. So what I'm doing here is I'm just cutting this bag in half inside the container. These are pretty heavy bags, and to save your bags, you can just use this technique where you cut the bag in half and then add the soil inside the container and then just lift up half the bag, and it becomes very easy to handle this potting mix in this way. And once you've settled the potting mix down in the container, you can water it. You can make sure that there are no air gaps in the soil now, and this will make sure that the soil settles down in the container. This is an important step that a lot of us miss. After adding soil to the container, make sure you water it. And now our option 2 is to use a DIY potting mix where we are using peat moss, as you can see here. And you're supposed to use this in the proportion of 30% peat moss, 30% compost, and 30% perlite or vermiculite. Now I've made this potting mix so many times that I just eyeball the quantity of the peat moss. And once I'm done with adding the peat moss, I add the other ingredients. And remember that I'm not really filling up this container completely now, and you'll shortly see the reason why. I've added the peat moss now, and I'm now going to add the compost. This is the free compost that we got from our city, and that was really helpful in adding some volume to these containers. We're now going to be adding some perlite. You don't have to add a lot of perlite, and you can also substitute this by using vermiculite, depending on what's available in your area. And a lot of people had some concerns about whether they are safe or not. They're completely safe. And what I do is I just moisten them, and then I make sure that I mix them very well, as you can see here. And the reason I only filled half the container is because I wanted this container to have good drainage. And I'm going to water this so that all the water drains properly from half this container. Now, if you fill this container to the top, it might not be very easy for the water to go all the way down. So this is just a little tip for you to know that it's best to fill half the container and then water and then fill the rest of the container. So that's exactly what we're doing here. We are now filling in the rest of the container with peat moss, compost, and perlite. It's very similar to what we did. I'm using two sources of compost here. This is the compost that we got from the city, and then I'm also using some horse manure compost. And as you can see here, this forms a really good, well-draining potting mix. And this is a lot cheaper than buying your own potting mix as well. As you can see here, it's pretty fast draining. Now, instead of perlite, you can also use vermiculite. We prepared this one container where we used peat moss, compost, and then we added a mix of perlite and vermiculite. And the reason for using vermiculite in your mix is to retain more water in your potting mix. Now, some people have asked me whether vermiculite contains asbestos or some other harmful ingredients. Now, this is actually a myth or a news that was shared many years ago. And these days, the vermiculite and perlite that you get in the stores do not have any contaminants. They don't have asbestos. They're just volcanic rocks and made from ingredients that are very safe to use in your garden. As you can see here, we are mixing this up. You can see the tiny particles of vermiculite in this mix. And I generally use vermiculite only if I'm growing some leafy greens or herbs and they need a lot of water to be retained in the soil. But if you're growing something like root plants, you can skip the vermiculite and go with perlite. And once again, what we're going to be doing is adding some water here, making sure that the potting mix is nicely moistened. And this also removes the air pockets and makes sure that the soil is well settled down. And here is a little trick that I use to jumpstart my plants and my soil. I add some fish fertilizer or fish emulsion into my soil. And what I do is I take 2 tablespoons of this fish emulsion and add it to 2 gallons of this watering can that I'm going to be using. And what happens by doing this is fish emulsion or fish fertilizer contains a lot of beneficial bacteria. And all we do is we just add some water to this watering can to fill it up, apply it onto our soil, the soil that we just created in our container, the container mix. And what this does is it adds a gazillion beneficial bacteria into the soil that can be very beneficial to your plants. Now, although you're adding fertilizers, you're adding amendments, the plants still need to take up the nutrients. And by adding fish fertilizer to this mix, you are increasing microbial activity to a level where it's very easy for the plants to take up the nutrients and grow well. And here you can see all our containers. They look very nice, and we are now ready for the next step. Our fourth step is to attach the drip emitters. And the reason I'm doing this as the last step is because it's very easy to do. You just need some space to punch a hole in the main line. I'm using this punch tool here. And then you need to use a barbed connector. The barbed connector goes between the main line and the 1/4 inch tubing that you see here. And you just push it in. You don't need any tools to do this. You might struggle a little bit because the 1/4 inch tubing is very small. But once you push this in, it is pretty solid as far as the contacts go. And you can cut this 1/4 inch tubing to the size that you need. And I usually like to put at least 2 emitters in a whiskey barrel or a wine barrel size container. So I'm going to be using a T here. This is a barbed T. And this barbed T lets me connect 2 more 1/4 inch tubing lines to which I can attach the emitters. So in the next step, I'm going to be attaching this 1/4 inch tubing to the T, the barbed T that we attached here. And then cut it where you would want the first emitter. And once you've done that, you would do the same thing on the other side. You attach it to the barbed T and then make sure that you have enough 1/4 inch tubing to connect your emitters. And here are our emitters. We're going to be using this fan bubbler, which is a great choice for these wine barrels or whiskey barrels. And the reason I like to use them is because they provide a lot of even watering over a large area. And as you can see here, the drip emitters have now been set up. You can secure these further by using garden pins, but this is how it looks like. It looks beautiful. Our containers are now ready for some planting. Our final step in our container garden is to plant our vegetables. And in the first container, we are going to be planting our tomatoes. We grew these tomatoes from seeds and they've grown pretty big now. And they would be a perfect fit for these wine barrel or whiskey barrel containers. And this is a cherry tomato variety. You can see here it's grown pretty well. And you can plant 1 plant in each container. And the best part about this wine barrel container or the whiskey barrel container is that the tomato cage that you see here fits in perfectly. In the second container, we're going to be planting shallots. Now we got this on sale at Lowe's for $1. It was $1 for 1 bag and they were of pretty good quality, so I picked up 2 bags. And I'm going to be sorting this to make sure that we have some really good quality shallots to begin with. Discard any that have rot or they just crumble very easily. Take the best ones. That's the best part about getting these shallots on sale, is that you get to choose the best ones and grow the best ones. Now, once you've sorted out the shallots, you can place them as you see here. They need to be about 4 inches apart, and then save the rest so that if some of your shallots don't germinate, you can use these spare ones. We are next going to be planting our pepper plants. We have 2 pepper plants that you see here. We have the California Wonder Pepper and the Poblano Pepper, both great pepper varieties to grow in your vegetable garden. And in 1 wine barrel or a whiskey barrel container, you can plant 2 pepper plants. And I've not had good luck growing pepper plants in Southern California, but we'll see how this goes. The next container would be having this ghost pepper variety. It's one of the hottest pepper variety that you can find. And I would not recommend growing this unless you like very hot peppers. We're going to be growing cilantro in this other container that we added vermiculite in for better moisture retention. And you need to scar the seeds or split the seeds as you see here. And this will improve your germination vastly when it comes to cilantro. This is another step that a lot of growers miss doing, but this will give you really good germination rates and your plants will be up very soon. And all we're going to do is make a circle here, 2 concentric circles, and then add the seeds, and the cilantro should grow very quickly. And our container garden is now ready and our plants are growing very well. So I'm sure this should inspire you to start your own container garden soon. So I hope you liked this video, and if you have any questions, do post them in the comments box below. If you like our video, do give us a thumbs up. And if you want to see some more videos on container gardening, do let us know. And do let us know whether you already have a container garden or are you planning to start one. We'll see you again soon. Happy gardening.